Gomati, who is the founder and director of the Sadeq Institute, a public policy think tank based in Tripoli. He joins us now from London. Thanks so much for being with us. First, tell me if you are pleased, with the developments of the last week. Do you think Libya is finally on its way toward a peaceful resolution of this conflict?
It's the first step in a very, very long journey. I think we have to look at the greater context here. This is a massive relief after exactly 15 months of conflict and an offensive that has displaced anywhere between 200 and 400,000 civilians from Tripoli, that has just brought the loss of life that is catastrophic, but has also, just ravaged so much of the civilian infrastructure in and around Tripoli that for many of the residents now, 15 months later, this is a good relief. But it also begs the question of the long term. How do we stop these kind of conflicts from taking place? How do they build a resilient political process? And how do they stop military strongmen from assuming these kind of powers? Because we also have to remember, that this has been going on for a long time. This is also 6 years. This is the second attempt that Khalifa Haftar has made since May 15th, 2014, when he sparked Libya's last civil war. So this is a very, very long journey, and we're just one more step in a very, very long term, it could be a journey that even lasts even longer. So we don't really know yet.
Okay. Anas, I have to ask you this. What about those in Libya who simply do not support the government in Tripoli? Would you expect those civilians, even the ones that don't necessarily support Khalifa Haftar, to take some kind of action now that they see the government of national accord consolidating their gains?
Well, there was a lot of people that were, up in the air. They're not really sure whether or not they supported the GNA or what kind of transition the GNA had in mind. But, in the face of what Khalifa Haftar offered them, which was, quote unquote, he came as a liberator on April 4th, 2019, but was unable to liberate and was unable to do much apart from looking like a conqueror. He brought drones, he brought shells. So I think, the GNA for many people now is a custodian that they want to work with. It's been responsive to a certain amount of, to a certain degree, but it's also a transitionary body. And I think what Libya needs is elections. It needs to revisit that and get a roadmap as soon as possible. For those people that are looking, for a responsive government, they need to make that choice themselves. And Libya has been in that political deadlock for 6 years now. And Khalifa Haftar certainly wasn't offering them anything that they needed. They were, many people were frustrated around the situation in Tripoli in 2019, but now they're desperate for an end to the war and desperate for a beginning of a new future.
Okay. Anas, if the peace process is to move forward under the auspices of the UN, as Turkey is specifically demanding at this point, how should it do so? Who should be at the table negotiating what interests?
I think we often forget that these elite bargains that we try to envisage, where we try and get someone like Haftar to sign a piece of paper, it's meaningless. Haftar is pretty much irrelevant to a peace process. He sees himself as a military ruler, as a strongman, but he's really just a reflection of how strong his backers are, Russia and the UAE. And today, something has to happen to try to break that deadlock. Someone has to negotiate directly with Crown Prince MBZ, directly with Lavrov or with Putin, and come to some form of an agreement, because Khalifa Haftar, militarily speaking, owns nothing on the ground. We saw in the last 10 days, many of his forces are, in fact, Russian mercenaries, and they were seen fleeing from Tripoli. The air power that has been brought into Libya has predominantly been foreign air power, and that's on both sides. But ultimately, Haftar's side has been using this for 6 years. So in terms of what Haftar possesses in the ground and in the air, very little of that is Libyan. I see very little reason to bring him to the table, because essentially, Khalifa Haftar cannot be kept to his word. It's very, very difficult when they've already negotiated a peace process around him since 2014. And the real onus, the real responsibility here is asking what tools the UN has at its disposal, and whether or not the UN wants to sanction people and individuals and groups that commit war crimes, whether or not it wants to sanction groups that spoil the diplomatic process. And if it doesn't want to, then you'll have someone like Khalifa Haftar coming for generations to come. I think they have to really establish the rules of the game, because far too often those rules have been broken, and you find the emergence of people like Khalifa Haftar that kind of grow out of that environment. So I think we shouldn't really be looking just at Libya. We should be looking at the outside and asking, what else for the UN? They had a peace process in Berlin in January that fell apart within days, literally within days. So another process moving forward is not going to work unless those rules of the game are established.
Okay, Anas Al Gomati, we're going to have to leave it there. Thank you so much for joining us with your insight from London.